Saturday afternoon in Arlington, Texas was bathed in soft golden sunlight. Malcolm Greene, a big black man with a gentle soul, stood at the grill, flipping ribs that sizzled and popped. "Daddy, I'm starving." Little Ava ran up and tugged at his shirt, making Tanya laugh. "Hold on, princess. Almost ready." Derrick carried out the drinks and teased. Dad went overboard with the marinade again. "Smells so good I'm about to pass out." The family atmosphere was easy and light. A neighbor called over, "Smells good, Malcolm." Kids rode bikes around the yard. Everything was strangely peaceful, but at the end of the street, beneath the shade of an oak tree, a black Harley quietly rolled to a stop. Lawson, a full-patch Hell's Angel, sat behind the handlebars, his half-helmet hiding half his face. He watched Malcolm's family and gave a slight nod. Good man, still the same. No one in the neighborhood recognized him or knew why he was there. And then in a single breath the peace was ripped apart. From the top of the street came the roar of engines and flashing red and blue lights. "What the?" Tanya turned. 3 patrol cars screeched straight into the front yard, braking so hard that concrete dust exploded everywhere. Malcolm frowned. Ava clung to her mother's legs in terror. Hawk lightly squeezed the throttle and whispered, "Here we go." The doors of the 3 patrol cars flew open almost in unison, shredding the quiet suburban afternoon in Arlington. Detective Ray Dalton stepped out first, walking with the swagger of a man who treated authority like a weapon. He rested his hand on his holster, eyes sweeping the yard like he was hunting Texas's most dangerous criminal. "Hands up where I can see them," he barked, voice cracking like a whip. Malcolm, still holding the platter of grilled meat, hadn't even processed what was happening when Dalton charged forward and shoved him hard in the chest. The push was so violent, the tongs flew from Malcolm's hand and clanged sharply against the concrete. Ava screamed and bolted into Tanya's arms. Tanya instinctively stepped forward to shield her daughter and was immediately blocked by Officer Blake Turner. "Ma'am, step back," he growled, throwing an arm out as if she were a threat. Officer Cody Ruiz stood behind them, hand resting lightly on his metal flashlight, eyes darting like someone just waiting for the order to make things worse. Dalton got right in Malcolm's face, stale coffee and cigarette breath blasting him. "We got a report of drug trafficking, cash transactions, suspicious gathering." He bit off each word like Malcolm was already convicted before Dalton even arrived. Malcolm raised both hands high, palms open, voice unbelievably calm. "Officer, I'm just cooking dinner for my family. We haven't done anything wrong." No shaking, no overreacting, just a calm that made Dalton feel challenged more than obeyed. Derrick took half a step forward, worried for his dad, but Turner instantly pointed in the boy's face. "Kid, one more step and we've got a problem." Tanya pulled Derrick close, eyes wide with panic. Malcolm looked at his wife and kids, then straight at Dalton, voice steady and deliberate. "Please don't scare my children. They haven't done anything wrong." It wasn't the usual pleading you hear from someone being hassled by cops. It was the calm of a man who measured every move, kept his breathing even, and read the situation like instinct. And that very calm instantly pissed Dalton off. "Pretty calm, huh?" Dalton said, stepping closer. "Doesn't look like someone under investigation." Malcolm answered immediately, hands still raised. "Because I know I'm innocent." Right then, a 4th patrol car pulled up. The door opened and a female officer stepped out. Officer Leah Monroe, hair in a neat ponytail, eyes sharp but without the aggression of the others. "What's the situation?" she asked. Dalton didn't even glance at her. "Drug investigation," anonymous tip. But Monroe didn't swallow the half-assed explanation. She studied Malcolm closely, how he angled his body to shield Ava and Tanya from Dalton's approach, how he kept his center of gravity low, feet planted solid like someone trained, and especially his steady breathing. Not like an ignorant civilian, not like a drug dealer, not like someone panicking in front of cops. He doesn't move like a dealer, Monroe thought. He moves like someone who's been trained. Malcolm looked over at Monroe and gave a small nod. "Ma'am, please just keep my kids safe." The way he said it, no tremor, no stuttering, no resistance, only confused Monroe more about the original report. Dalton snarled, irritated, "Don't act smart with me." And at the end of the street, under the oak tree, Lawson, full-patch Hell's Angel, pressed the button on the helmet cam. The lens zoomed, capturing Dalton shoving Malcolm, every action, every baseless accusation in crystal clarity. Hawk lowered his voice, like he was reminding himself, "I got you, brother. Stay cool." Turner shifted his stance, hand still near his gun, then suddenly bellowed, "Everybody up against the wall, right now." The shout cracked like a whip. Tanya flinched and clutched Ava tighter. Derrick froze. Malcolm instantly stepped half a step forward on instinct, using his big frame to shield his wife and kids. Dalton didn't wait another second. He lunged, grabbed Malcolm's arm, and yanked him away from his protective position. "I said everybody against that wall." He pointed to the brick wall beside the back door, where shadows already covered half the yard. Tanya stammered, "Officer, please, what is going on?" "We didn't," but Turner cut her off with a growl. "Ma'am, I'm not saying it again. Move." Ava cried louder. Derrick backed up with his mom, but his eyes stayed locked on Dalton, full of fear and anger. Malcolm kept X's voice low, calm but firm. "I'll go, but don't threaten my family." Dalton got right in Malcolm's face, almost forehead to forehead. "Don't tell me how to do my job, fat man," he spat, emphasizing the last two words with contempt. "You want this to go easy or hard?" Malcolm held Dalton's gaze steady, unflinching, then turned so Tanya and the kids could back safely toward the wall. Classic crisis training moves. Control, redirect, protect, no extra words, just stance, foot placement, shoulder angle. Monroe watched from a few steps back. She caught every detail Dalton and Turner were deliberately ignoring. Malcolm's demeanor wasn't criminal. Nobody suspected of dealing puts their family first. Nobody terrified keeps breathing that even unless they've trained for it. And nobody has tactical reflexes that smooth, unless they've been in life or death environments. Something's wrong, Monroe thought, fingers tightening on the notebook in her pocket. Dalton shoved Malcolm forward, slamming his back against the wall like he was restraining a violent suspect. Tanya held Ava tight, shaking while whispering, "It's okay, baby, mommy's here." But Ava only heard her own ragged breathing. Derrick stood beside his mom, fists clenched, fighting tears, but Turner noticed. He stepped closer, voice low and venomous. "You got something on you, kid? Drugs? Knife? Weapon?" Derrick's eyes went wide. "What? No, I watch your tone," Turner snapped, stepping closer like he was just waiting for an excuse. "Little punks like you always think you're tough." Malcolm heard it and immediately turned his head, voice hardening. "Hey, stay away from my son." Dalton slammed his hand into Malcolm's chest again, hard enough to make the wall behind him vibrate. "You don't give orders to my officers." Malcolm clenched his jaw but stayed still. No resistance, no cursing. Just burning eyes locked on Turner, the eyes of a father who'd take the injury for his kid but was smart enough not to fall into the trap. Monroe stepped forward, voice low but clear. "Detective, maybe we should slow down. This scene doesn't look." Dalton cut her off, biting each word. "Monroe, keep the family contained. I'm searching the truck." But Monroe had seen enough. Malcolm wasn't dangerous. Turner had crossed the line. Dalton was running the tempo the way she'd seen before. Fast, rough, no procedure, no civilian safety. She took a step back but never took her eyes off Dalton's hands as he headed for the pickup. In the shadows at the end of the street, Hawk Lawson leaned forward, twisting the zoom on his helmet cam one more notch. The view widened, capturing every face under the chaotic flashing patrol lights. Turner threatening Derrick, Ava shaking, Malcolm pinned against the wall, every detail caught. "This ain't good," Hawk whispered, voice low like the Harley's idol. "No, can't let this family take any more." He adjusted the angle to get both Malcolm and the pickup. Dalton was approaching. His knuckles went white, gripping the camera handle. While shouting, sobbing, and chaotic footsteps filled the air, Hawk stayed perfectly silent. A ghost, a silent guardian, a biker carrying an unpaid debt, and now realizing the time had come. In the backyard, Dalton bent over Malcolm's truck bed, setting up the next act in a play he'd performed too many times. But this time, unlike the victims before, he didn't know a lens was recording every second. Hawk turned the camera one last time and muttered, "All right, brother, I'm here. Let them show who they really are." Because he knew one more mistake from Dalton, and the whole world would know. Dalton walked up to Malcolm's pickup with the confidence of a man who thought he owned the board. The patrol lights flashed red and blue across the glossy black paint, turning the scene into something out of a horror movie. "Stay right there." He barked toward Malcolm without looking back, as if he knew for sure Malcolm, a father backed into a corner, wouldn't do anything that could hurt his family. Malcolm stood pressed against the brick wall, hands still raised, breathing slow and deep to stay calm. Ava was still sobbing in Tanya's arms. Derrick ground his teeth, staring at Dalton, afraid to move an inch. Turner stood closest to them, chest heaving with that trademark arrogant aggression. Ruiz hung farther back, eyes flicking to Dalton waiting for orders. And Monroe, she stood a few steps from Malcolm, trying to watch both the scene and her colleagues, her stomach knotting with a terrible feeling. "Let's see what our friend here is hiding," Dalton announced loudly so the family would hear. He jerked his chin toward the pickup like he'd handled 100 cases just like this. But Monroe knew not one of those 100 followed procedure. Dalton yanked the tailgate open with a violent pull. The metal snapped loud like a knife through the air. He started rummaging toolbox, tie-down straps, foam cooler for the meat, random odds and ends. He acted like he was really searching, but Monroe saw the awkwardness in every move. He wasn't checking the places any trained officer would check first. No logic, just surface scanning, like he was waiting for the right moment. Malcolm watched, heart in his throat. "Officer Dalton," he called out, still polite but laced with worry. "That's my truck. Please be careful with my tools." Dalton glanced back with a sneer. "Tools, huh? Funny. Every criminal loves that word," Tanya snapped. "My husband is not a criminal." Turner threw a hand up. "Ma'am," I said quiet. Ruiz glanced over, eyes flickering for a second, but he didn't have the guts to go against Dalton. Monroe took half a step forward. "Detective, maybe we should wait for consent or reasonable suspicion." Dalton cut in, voice ice cold. "We've got it." He said it like a magic shield, even though Monroe knew it wasn't enough for a warrantless search with zero visible evidence. Dalton bent deeper into the truck bed, upper body almost disappearing from everyone's view, except Hawk's. At the end of the street under the oak, Hawk cranked the zoom to maximum. Through the lens he clearly saw Dalton's right hand slide behind the spare tire, a spot no one in the yard could see. "Here it comes," Hawk whispered, voice tight, veins bulging as he gripped the camera. And then right in front of Hawk's camera, under the chaotic flashing lights and suffocating tension, Dalton did what he'd done many times before. His hand pulled a small bag from his jacket pocket, a clear Ziploc with white powder, anyone would recognize. No hesitation, no tremor. A practiced move from someone who'd done it too often. He slipped the cocaine bag into the space behind the spare tire, fast, clean, like a magician, then pulled his hand back out. Less than a second. 1 second enough to destroy a man's life. But tonight, for the first time in years, there was a witness no one saw coming. A biker. A Hell's Angel. A shadow who owed Malcolm his life. "Done," Hawk said softly, hitting the button to lock the video file into main memory. Crystal clear. Dalton straightened up, stepped out of the truck bed looking like he'd just found the score of his career. He glanced around, making sure everyone, especially the victim's family, was watching, then held the Ziploc bag high and shouted, "Found it." Ava let out a piercing scream, as if those words shattered her entire little world. Tanya collapsed to her knees, hands over her mouth in shock. Derrick yelled, "That's a lie. My dad didn't." Turner roared, "Kid, shut your mouth." Malcolm stood frozen, jaw clenched so tight it bulged, face full of pain and disbelief. He looked at Dalton, at the cocaine bag, then at his trembling daughter in Tanya's arms. Finally he spoke, voice low but ringing clear. "That's not mine." Dalton smirked, the line he always had ready. "They all say that." He stepped closer to Malcolm, waving the bag like undeniable proof. "Looks like your weekend BBQ just turned into a felony, big guy." Monroe felt an icy shock down her spine. She stared at the bag, remembering 3 other cases where Dalton had found the exact same thing. Same Ziploc, same spot, same lines, same weird search pattern. No way, she thought. But her eyes had just seen the truth. Dalton never searched. He performed. Malcolm looked Dalton dead in the eye. No flinching. "I said it again. That is not mine." His voice dropped with the weight of his heartbeat, an oath backed by a lifetime of decency. Dalton just shrugged. "Tell it to the judge." At the end of the street, Hawk Lawson stood motionless, eyes behind dark glasses burning with rage. He looked at the cocaine bag, at Malcolm's face, and inside him a fire of fury exploded. There are moments in a biker's life when silence is no longer an option. But today's action wouldn't be fists, not violence, not roaring the Harley into the station. It would be truth, evidence, justice. Hawk took a deep breath, saved a second copy of the video, then sent it straight to President Rocco Delgado with one tap. "Rocco, we need you. It's bad." And in that moment, Dalton had no idea the found it. He just shouted. Was the end of his career. and his freedom. Because for the first time in his dirty life, he'd been caught red-handed by a Hell's Angel. Dalton zipped the cocaine bag shut with a sharp snap, then turned back to Malcolm like a man who thought victory was already in his pocket. "Turn around, hands behind your back," he ordered, voice dripping with glee. Malcolm didn't move for a few seconds, like he needed one moment to breathe, to process how a family BBQ had become a nightmare in 10 minutes. But then he slowly turned. No resistance, because he refused to scare the kids anymore. Dalton grabbed Malcolm's wrists and twisted them behind his back. The metallic click of the handcuffs locking sounded like a death sentence for an innocent man's reputation. He deliberately cranked them tighter than necessary. Malcolm gritted his teeth as his wrist turned red and raw. "Too tight?" Dalton asked, full of mockery. "Good?" Derrick saw it and screamed. "Let my dad go. He didn't do anything." The boy lunged half a step forward, but Turner swooped in, slamming an arm across Derrick's chest so hard the kid stumbled back and hit the brick wall. "Back up," Turner snarled, face inches from Derrick's like he was threatening a grown man instead of a 15-year-old. "Touch me again. See what happens." Derrick yelled back, eyes red. "You're the ones who..." Tanya grabbed her son's arm and pulled him close, voice breaking. Don't give them an excuse." Ava was sobbing hysterically, tiny hands clutching her mom's legs like letting go would make everything disappear. "Mommy, why are they taking Daddy?" That little question stabbed Malcolm straight through the heart. He turned his head as much as the cuffs allowed and forced a smile for his daughter. "It's okay, baby. Daddy's still here." But the smile trembled, not just from the cuffs. Dalton dragged Malcolm toward the patrol car, deliberately yanking so Malcolm stumbled and almost fell. He wanted to turn this big man weak in front of the whole neighborhood, and he succeeded. Neighbors were coming out, standing on sidewalks, many pulling out phones to record. "Oh my God," Mrs. Johnson next door gasped. "Malcolm, what did he do?" "I knew it. Something off about that family," someone else whispered, even though they had no idea what was happening. No one knew the truth. No one saw Dalton plant the cocaine. No one knew this family was innocent. All they saw was a big black man being dragged away like a dangerous criminal. Malcolm took a deep breath, kept his voice calm. "Officers, please, my family." "Shut up," Dalton snapped, shoving Malcolm toward the back door of the car. Ava screamed, "Daddy, no, Daddy." Tanya sank to her knees holding her daughter, tears streaming. Derrick stood rigid, lips trembling but eyes locked on his father, like he was burning every second of this injustice into his memory forever. Ruiz opened the back door of the patrol car. Dalton roughly pushed Malcolm's head down to stuff him inside. The cuffs dug into his skin. Malcolm winced but didn't fight, didn't beg. Neighbors still filming from a distance kept whispering. "Didn't know he was into drugs. Seemed so nice. You never really know people." Every word cut into Malcolm's pride like a knife. Monroe stood closest, watching everything, and the unease in her gut turned to nausea. Not one detail looked like a proper arrest. Everything was wrong, horribly wrong. Turner stood blocking Malcolm's family from the car, growling, "Back, all of you." Tanya held Ava tight. Derrick's fists were clenched so hard his knuckles were white. Right then, from the end of the street came a low sound, brrrm, the Harley's engine giving one soft growl like a beast waking up. No one noticed except one person. Lawson sat on his gleaming black Harley under the oak tree, eyes never leaving the scene of Malcolm being forced into the car. The patrol lights flashed across the Hell's Angels patch on his vest, painting a blood-red streak across the black leather. Hawk tilted his head, replayed the moment Dalton planted the bag, frame by frame. Undeniable. "All right," Hawk whispered, voice low, cold and hard as steel. "Time to move." That soft Harley growl was the first warning, the get-ready signal only bikers would understand. And if anyone was paying attention, they'd have seen Hawk turn the bike toward the main road where he was about to call in people this whole neighborhood had no idea were coming. But there was one thing Malcolm knew, even though he couldn't see it. If anyone in this world had ever sworn to always have his back, it was a Hell's Angel sitting in the dark, getting ready to repay a 3-year-old debt. And tonight that debt was about to change everything. The patrol car screeched to a halt in front of Arlington North Division, brakes howling like a warning. Dalton yanked the back door open and dragged Malcolm out like a sandbag, ignoring the fact that the cuffs had already dug so deep into his wrists that dark purple bruises and streaks of blood were visible. Inside the station, The harsh white fluorescent lights made everything look colder and more lifeless than ever. The desk sergeant glanced up and asked out of habit, "What have we got?" Dalton answered instantly, voice flat like he was reading from a script he'd memorized long ago. "Felony-level possession. Possible intent to distribute." His tone was so detached it sounded exactly like the old script, because it was. He'd used those same words too many times. Ruiz shoved Malcolm toward booking room 3 while Turner followed behind, practically begging Malcolm to make the tiniest move so he could scream, resisting arrest. Malcolm stayed exactly the same. No resistance, no yelling, just head down, walking where he was pushed, like a man who knew any wrong twitch would be twisted into another charge. But in his eyes, despite the pain and the rage, there was no despair. Booking room 3 stank of bleach and stale coffee. Cold metal table, chairs tossed around carelessly, and an old mugshot camera covered in years of fingerprints. Dalton tossed a stack of forms onto the table and sat down like this was the best part of his day. "Sit." Malcolm sat, wrists twisted behind him, so he had to lean forward to ease the pain. Dalton opened the file and started writing, too fast, too smooth, never once looking at Malcolm to ask questions, like every answer was already in his head. Monroe walked in and leaned against the doorframe, watching. She didn't interrupt, she just studied every expression, every pen click. Dalton asked for show, full name, Malcolm Greene, age, 42. The rest Dalton filled in himself. Prior suspicious activity, possible gang affiliation. Monroe frowned. "Detective, when did we confirm that? We haven't even run his record yet." Dalton waved her off. "I've seen it 100 times, Monroe. Trust me." Monroe went quiet, but inside her chest it felt like ice. Exactly like the last 3 arrests, all handled by Dalton, all black or Latino men, and every single one had a Ziploc bag of cocaine, found in the vehicle after Dalton searched alone. She remembered the scene photos, the victims' initial statements before lawyers shut them up. Identical Ziploc bags, spotless, no prints, except police prints, and Dalton was always the one who found them. Right then Malcolm looked straight at Dalton. "I told you, that's not mine." "Save it," Dalton cut him off. "You'll get your chance to explain." Monroe felt her heart squeeze. She looked at Malcolm and saw that strange calm in his eyes. Not surrender, calm that came from surviving worse. He sat straight, feet planted solid on the floor, like this was just another training exercise instead of an interrogation. It reminded her of the veterans she'd worked with, how they scanned every exit, kept their breathing even, never let emotion cloud judgment. Turner passed the doorway and sneered at Malcolm. "Acting like some Navy SEAL, huh?" Malcolm didn't answer. He just stared at the cold table and breathed slow. Dalton laughed. "Yeah, thinks he's a SEAL. A fat guy a SEAL? That's rich." Monroe tilted her head, frowning. She'd been watching long enough to see it clearly. Malcolm wasn't shaking, wasn't scared, wasn't panicking. He was assessing. An innocent person usually freaks out. A guilty one usually sweats, argues, or tries to bolt. Malcolm was neither. That made her doubt not Malcolm, but Dalton. "Detective," Monroe said slowly, "I reviewed your last 3 reports. The evidence in those cases was recovered under almost identical circumstances." Dalton looked up, eyes narrowing. "And," Monroe swallowed. "Patterns like that need oversight." Turner overheard and jumped in. "Here we go with the conspiracy theories again." Dalton stared at Monroe, voice low and threatening. "You got something to say, officer?" Monroe looked at Malcolm, then at the half-written file, then back at Malcolm. "Not yet," she said. But her pulse was racing. Malcolm lifted his head and met Monroe's eyes. A calm, deep look, almost grateful that she was questioning what deserved to be questioned. "Officer," Malcolm said quietly, "please just make sure my family's safe." Monroe gave the tiniest nod, one Dalton didn't see, but Malcolm did. No words, but enough for him to know she was the only person in that room still holding on to a conscience. Dalton stood up fast and slammed the file shut. "Booking done. Get him to holding. He ain't going anywhere." Ruiz yanked Malcolm out of the room, still using unnecessary force. As Malcolm passed Monroe, she clearly saw the deep purple bruises on his wrists, marks from cuffs deliberately cranked too tight. When the door closed behind Malcolm, Monroe let out a heavy breath. 3 words kept repeating in her head like an alarm. Same old pattern, and somewhere out there she had no idea a Hell's Angel was tearing through the night with a video that could bring this whole station down. But one thing Malcolm knew, even though he couldn't see it, someone was coming. Someone who had promised. And that promise was getting very close. Hawk Lawson roared down Collins Street on his Harley, city lights streaking across his helmet like trails of fire. He'd watched the video at least 10 times since leaving Malcolm's neighborhood, and every single time the rage tightened another notch inside him. But as he blew through an intersection, a different memory slammed into him. The first time he met Malcolm Greene, 3 years ago in Weatherford, Texas. It was pouring that day. A lonely country road near an abandoned ranch, not a single car in sight. Hawk back then was still a hot-headed, reckless bastard, blasting down the flooded road without slowing down. Wind whipped his face. The rear tire slipped and then boom, he lost it. The Harley flew. Hawk tumbled into the ditch and smashed into a rock. Rain mixed with the blood pouring from his forehead. He tried to stand and collapsed into the mud. Fuck, he groaned, but no one heard. Not a single vehicle. Just rain hammering the ground and wind screaming through the trees. Then 2 headlights cut through the downpour. An old pickup stopped. Door opened. A big man stepped out. Dark shirt soaked, eyes worried but calm. Malcolm Greene. "Hey, you okay?" Malcolm shouted over the rain and ran toward him without knowing who was lying in the mud. Half conscious, Hawk only saw a huge shadow shielding him from the storm. Malcolm lifted him up, arms strong but careful not to hurt him worse. "Stay with me, brother," Malcolm said, voice low and warm, the kind of voice Hawk never forgot. Malcolm half-carried Hawk's entire weight, opened the passenger door and set him inside. He grabbed a towel from the glove box, wiped the blood off Hawk's forehead and said, "I'm getting you home. Gotta keep you warm." Hawk mumbled, Why help me?" Malcolm looked at him like the question was strange. "Because you're hurt." He didn't ask who Hawk was, didn't ask why he crashed, didn't judge the Hells Angels ink showing through the torn sleeve, just helped. Malcolm drove Hawk home, wheeled the Harley into the garage himself, patched him up with Tanya's first aid kit, fed him hot soup, laid a blanket on the couch and said, "Sleep, tomorrow will be better." Hawk lay there, soaked but warmer inside than he'd ever been. He looked at the stranger who'd saved him, treated him like family. "You didn't have to do all this," Hawk said. Malcolm just shook his head and smiled. "Everybody needs help sometime, even the stubborn ones." Hawk stared at him for a long time, then said words he didn't even understand at the time. "If you ever need me, I'll ride." Malcolm laughed. "All right, brother." They never saw each other again, but Hawk never forgot that promise, even if it had just been something said on a rainy night. And now, watching Dalton plant coke in Malcolm's truck, that oath roared back like thunder. He pulled the Harley over on a dark stretch of road, breathing hard like the rain was falling again. One hand on the bars, the other pulled out his phone. On the screen, the contact was simple. Rocco Delgado, Prez. Hawk hit call. After a few rings, a deep, gravelly voice full of authority answered, "Talk." Hawk gripped the phone so hard, his knuckles went white. Voice barely more than a growl. "Rocco, they set him up. The man who saved my life. They planted coke in his truck. I got it all on video, every fucking frame." Silence on the other end, the kind of silence that told Hawk Rocco was measuring just how bad this was. "Same guy, the one from Weatherford?" Hawk nodded, even though Rocco couldn't see. "Recognized him the second I saw him. He doesn't deserve this." Rocco took a long breath, then said the one sentence Hawk needed most. "Send me the video. We move now." Hawk sent the file. A minute later his phone buzzed 3 times. The chapter's internal signal. Message popped up, short and enough to make Hawk's heart pound. "Red Wing Protocol activated." Hawk fired the Harley back to life. He knew what was coming. He knew the weight of the army about to roll toward Arlington. Men in leather with a burning angel on their backs. Men who understood brotherhood deeper than blood. Hawk pulled his helmet down, dropped his shades and whispered the promise before blasting into the night. "Hold on, Malcolm. This time, I ride." The message Red Wing Protocol activated still glowed on his phone when Hawk cracked the throttle, the Harley's roar echoing down the boulevard like a war cry. In 10 minutes he crossed the Arlington, Fort Worth line, blowing past streets blurred yellow under the lights, until the old wooden sign appeared. Hells Angels, Fort Worth, Redwood Charter. Inside the clubhouse, heavy rock, loud laughs, and clinking beer bottles went dead silent the second the metal door slammed open. Every eye turned to Hawk's sweaty, face dark, half helmet still on, eyes red from rage and memory. He didn't speak. He just tossed a USB onto the big wooden table in the center. Rocco Delgado, president of the chapter, caught it with one tattooed hand. "Everyone, shut it," Rocco barked. The room went graveyard quiet. Rocco plugged the USB into the wall-mounted screen. The chapter's lawyer, Marcus Chains Wellington, stepped up beside it. Chains was leaner than most expected. Long silver hair, metal-rimmed glasses, full patch cut like everyone else. But in Fort Worth he wasn't famous for fighting. He was famous for winning in court. Chains hit play. The screen lit up. The entire clubhouse fell into tense silence as Dalton planted the cocaine bag in Malcolm's truck. Close up. Crystal clear. No room for misinterpretation. The room erupted. That dirty cop. No way they're doing this again. Rocco raised a hand. Quiet. Hawk spoke, voice thick with anger. That man saved my life. 3 years ago he didn't ask who I was. Didn't care I was a Hell's Angel. Took me home. Took care of me. Kept me alive. A younger brother. Mason looked stunned. That's him. Malcolm from Weatherford? Hawk nodded. That's him. Chains pushed his glasses up, voice cold steel. All right, legally, this is gold. Chain of custody destroyed. No body cam, no warrant, no reasonable suspicion. And that, he pointed at the screen, is a felony caught in 4K. Rocco leaned both hands on the table, looking around at his brothers. Red Wing Protocol is live. You know what that means. A scrape of chairs. Brothers stood up almost in unison, like muscle memory. Red Wing Protocol wasn't used often. It was for the rarest cases, protecting an innocent when the system tries to crush him. No violence, no raid, no fight. Just truth, law, and brotherhood. Hawk said, they've got him locked up at Arlington North. His family saw everything. An older brother with ink from neck to chest muttered, that poor kid. Chains opened his laptop, fingers flying across the keys. We need a full team. Media, live streamers, civil rights groups, lawyers, and bodies. A lot of bodies. Rocco nodded. Bodies we got. He turned to the room, voice low and heavy. Tonight, we roll. Not for blood. Not for turf. For justice. The room roared. One brother spun his keys. The jingle spread like a battle signal. Then the sound started. Harleys firing up in the back lot all at once. Yellow lights in the clubhouse flickered. The wooden floor vibrated. The air thickened with gasoline, leather, and hot metal. The big metal doors rolled all the way open, revealing over 40 Harleys waiting. Road captain up front. Rows of headlights behind like an army ready to march. Hawk climbed on his bike. Eyes locked on Arlington. Chains slammed his laptop shut, pulled on gloves, and walked to Rocco's bike. Let's go show them what real justice looks like. Rocco zipped his cut, the death head angel on his back clear. Hell's Angels, Fort Worth. He pulled on his helmet and gave the final words before leading the pack. Wheels up. Road captain raised a fist. Every headlight snapped on at once, blinding bright, bouncing off the brick walls. Then the formation rolled out, slow, steady, powerful as tanks. The thunder of Harleys crashed together, sharp, deafening, rolling like thunder across the ground. The column moved toward the gate, red light glowing off every white patch, looking like an army of angels riding out of the dark. People on the street stopped and stared. Some stepped back in fear. Some pulled out phones because they'd never seen anything like it. A full Hell's Angels chapter mobilizing. But the biggest surprise, Hawk wasn't riding lead like usual. He rode in the middle. The position of the man carrying the proof, the man who started it all, the man repaying a debt. As the pack merged onto the highway, the sound echoed across Fort Worth and reached all the way to Arlington. A random driver asked, "What the hell's going on?" A brother answered, as he roared past, "We're riding for a good man." From above, the streetlights lit up the half-helmets and white angel patches, making them look less like a biker club and more like a relief force. Chains spoke into his headset. Media team ready. Live streamers in position. Civil rights contacts notified. We're heading straight to Arlington North. Rocco answered. Keep it clean. No weapons. We win this with truth. Hawk twisted the throttle, wind hitting his face like it was reminding him of the promise he made years ago. If you ever need me, I ride. And now, he wasn't riding alone. Over 40 Harleys thundered behind him, like a whole regiment. Not the military, not the government, just bikers. Brothers, Hell's Angels, and Arlington was about to hear the sound of engines announcing a storm no cop saw coming. The pack of Harleys was still almost a mile from Arlington North Division when the air inside the station started to change color. Officer Leah Monroe stood at a computer terminal, typing in her access code to run Malcolm Greene's background check. She kept her voice level when she spoke to Dalton. "Detective, we need to verify his record before final charges. It's procedure." Dalton didn't even look at her, just flicked his hand like swatting a fly. "Procedure is whatever I say it is. We've got evidence. End of story." Monroe bit her lip. She'd heard that answer too many times, but tonight her gut was screaming louder than ever. She pulled up the patrol car logs, the body cam records, and once again saw Dalton's camera had gone dark, the exact moment he searched the truck bed, same as the 3 prior cases. "This doesn't add up," she muttered. "It never does." She turned to Dalton. "Why did your camera go offline again? That's 4 times in 2 months. Dalton spun around, eyes flashing warning. "Monroe, drop it." The way he bit off those last 2 words made every other officer in the room stop typing and glance over. Ruiz stood nearby, pretending he heard nothing. Turner leaned against the counter with a smirk. Monroe just stared back at Dalton. No fear, only resolve. "We're supposed to protect the public." "Not." "I said drop it," Dalton repeated, voice grinding like metal on metal. But right then a deep, low rumble rolled in from the parking lot. Not cop cars. Not civilian rides. Harleys, 1, then 2, then 3. A rookie officer bolted past the window and practically pressed his face to the glass. Sir, I think there are." He never finished. 6 more Harleys rolled into view, lining up like a column of steel. The rookie's eyes went wide. "Are those Hell's Angels?" For a second the whole bullpen went dead silent. Monroe stepped to the window. 2 perfect rows of full-patch bikers were parking along the curb in front of the station. No trespassing, no yelling, no crossing the legal line. They just stopped, stood, watched, one by one. Another officer muttered, "What the hell are they doing here?" The rookie swallowed hard. "Why are Hell's Angels here? Did we arrest one of theirs?" Turner snorted. "Please, they don't give a damn unless he's wearing colors." But Monroe wasn't so sure, because she recognized the face stepping off the lead bike. Hawk Lawson, full patch, high ranking on every Fort Worth security bulletin. A man who never showed up for no reason. The bikers weren't pushing, weren't breaking laws. They just quietly formed a wide arc outside. Exactly the legal distance. Exactly the line they weren't allowed to cross. But that silence was louder than shouting. Dalton came to the window trying to look calm, but his hand unconsciously tightened on his belt. "They're just here to intimidate, nothing more." Sweat darkened his collar. Monroe glanced at Dalton, then back at the bikers. Under the floodlights she saw Hawk lightly tap the camera mounted on his helmet, like he was sending a message. "We have everything." Right then, another wave of Harleys turned into the lot. Then another, over 30 bikes total. They lined up in perfect formation, engines idling low, the sound vibrating the concrete under Monroe's boots. The rookie took 2 steps back. "Sir, this is starting to look like a siege," Dalton snapped. "It's not a siege. They have no authority here." But his voice cracked higher than normal, panic showing. Turner stared outside, face twisting. "They're up to something." Monroe took a deep breath. Her heart was pounding in a way that had nothing to do with fear of the bikers and everything to do with the feeling that the truth was almost here, and Dalton knew it. She saw it in his eyes, the tremor behind the arrogant mask. Dalton walked away from the window like a man looking for an exit in a maze he built himself. "Doesn't matter," he muttered, more to himself than anyone. "They don't know anything. They can't prove anything." But Monroe knew better. The men outside weren't here on suspicion. They were here on certainty. And when bikers are certain, they don't leave until justice is done. Ruiz edged closer to Dalton and whispered, "Sir, are you sure we did everything by the book?" Dalton glared. "You questioning me too?" Ruiz stepped back fast. "No, sir." But the doubt had already spread through the room like spilled oil. Another cop whispered, "If they're all here, something's really wrong." Monroe glanced at Malcolm's file, at the repeated patterns, the strange coincidences, then back at the silent wall of bikers outside. She knew what she had to do. Dalton looked out the window one more time, and this time real confusion flashed across his face, because in front of the entire pack stood Hawk Lawson, staring straight at him. No words, no threats, just a look that said one thing: we saw everything. Dalton turned away, face reddening. They think they can scare me, he spat. Like the words tasted bad, but nobody in the room believed his voice anymore, because outside, the Harleys kept idling in perfect rhythm, like the heartbeat of a force waiting for the exact moment to move. And for the first time in years, Arlington North Division was feeling real pressure, not from criminals, not from the media, from bikers, from men one innocent man had once saved. And now, in perfect silence, they were waiting for justice. The front doors of Arlington North Division slammed open with a heavy clank, and every Harley engine outside instantly dropped to a low growl, as if the whole pack was holding its breath. Chains Wellington walked in first. He didn't look like the stereotypical biker. No flexing, no chain swinging, no barking. Full patch cut, long silver hair, metal-rimmed glasses, briefcase in hand. He moved with the cold confidence of a lawyer who'd made cops sweat just by saying his name. Behind Chains were Hawk and 3 other bikers. No weapons, no chaos. Just walking straight into the lobby like they belonged there. The desk officer jumped up. "You can't just walk in here." Chains raised a hand, polite but firm. "Relax, officer. Marcus Wellington, licensed attorney in the state of Texas. I'm here to represent Malcolm Greene." He slid his bar card across the counter. No one knew how to react. His calm threw the whole lobby off balance. Phones started buzzing. Cops getting group chat alerts about the biker army outside. Dalton stormed in from the hallway, face red but voice trying to stay hard. "What the hell do you think you're doing? This is a police investigation." Chains cut him off, adjusting his glasses like he'd heard that line 100 times. "Detective Dalton, I'm here because one of your officers unlawfully detained and assaulted my client, and because you planted evidence." The room went dead. Ruiz choked. The rookie took 2 steps back. Turner froze. Dalton forced a thin smile. "That's a serious accusation, counselor." "Good," Chains said. "Here's serious evidence." He opened the briefcase, pulled out a USB identical to the one Hawk had shown the club, and set it in front of the night shift sergeant, the highest-ranking person there without a captain. "This contains video evidence recorded at the Greene residence less than an hour ago. It shows Detective Dalton placing a narcotics baggie behind the spare tire of my client's pickup truck." The bullpen exploded. "What? No way. Jesus Christ." Dalton slammed his hand on the counter. "That's bullshit. You can't just make videos and claim they're real." Chains looked up, eyes like steel. "Oh, it's real. Recorded in 4K on a helmet-mounted camera by a man standing legally on public property, well outside the restricted perimeter." He glanced at Hawk. Hawk said nothing. Arms crossed, stare locked on Dalton. Dalton's smile vanished. Chains turned back to the sergeant. "I need this loaded and played on your system immediately. If you refuse, I'll call the county judge, the DA, and the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. I'm sure they'll enjoy the show." The sergeant sighed. He knew the situation had already slipped far beyond Dalton's control. "All right." He took the USB and plugged it in. The big lobby screen lit up. The video rolled. Dalton leaning into the truck bed, pretending to search. 1 second later, a clear shot of his hand pulling a white Ziploc from his jacket and sliding it behind the spare tire. No hesitation, no hiding. One quick move. Camera caught it all. The room detonated. "Holy shit. Is that actual footage?" "That's him. That's obviously him." Turner stepped forward. "This is fake. Deep fake, whatever." Chains gave a dry laugh. "Officer Turner, unless Hollywood has CGI teams hiding in suburban Arlington, I suggest you stop talking." Dalton suddenly pointed at Chains. "You set this up. You bikers think you can walk in here and—" "Detective," Chains said slowly. Every word deliberate. "You're ranting. That won't help you." Monroe stepped out of the hallway. She'd heard everything. Without a word, she walked to her desk, logged in and pulled up the internal system. Turner frowned. "Where do you think you're doing my job?" she said without looking at him. "Something you should try sometime." She opened Dalton's body cam logs folder, scrolled to tonight. The data appeared, exactly like the last 3 arrests. Dalton's camera lost signal the moment he searched the truck. Monroe walked over to Chains and lowered her voice. "I have something your client will want to see." Chains studied her for a beat, then nodded. Monroe handed him a fresh USB with the extracted logs. "Tonight, and 3 other arrests. Same pattern, same officer." Chains smiled without humor. Detective Dalton, your night just got a lot worse. Dalton opened his mouth. Nothing came out. It wasn't suspicion anymore. It was evidence. Other officers started putting distance between themselves and him. Someone whispered, "Holy crap, he set them all up." Ruiz put a hand to his forehead, like he just realized he'd been standing on the wrong side. Turner growled, "This doesn't mean anything." "It means everything," Monroe said, her stare sharp enough that Turner looked away. Chains turned to the sergeant. Under the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure, Detective Dalton should be removed from this case immediately and placed on administrative hold. Sergeant. Zachary Stone nodded. "I'll notify Internal Affairs tonight, and the DA's office." Dalton roared, "You can't do that. This is my case." Chains adjusted his glasses. "Not anymore." Dalton spun toward Turner and Ruiz, voice cracking more with panic than anger. "Say something. Back me up." Neither answered. Hawk took one step forward. No words, no threat, just the same stare he'd once had looking death in the face on a rainy Texas night years ago. A look that said, "You picked the wrong man to frame." Dalton took half a step back, hands trembling. "Fine, finish the booking," he said, voice breaking, "before those animals outside think they can." Chains folded his arms, voice like metal. "Try it. Go on. Finish the booking." Dalton froze. For the first time all night he had no answer. Monroe stepped closer to Chains and whispered, "You're not done yet. DOJ still needs the full timeline." Chains nodded. "Good. They're already on their way." Dalton blinked. "DOJ?" The question vanished into the air as every Harley outside revved in perfect unison, a roar that shook the windows and declared, "We're waiting. And justice is almost here." The Harley engines outside hammered against the glass walls, making the whole building vibrate like a metal army was keeping time with the station's heartbeat. Inside, the air was thick as Hawk's video froze on the final frame, Dalton's hand sliding the cocaine bag behind the spare tire. Chains slowly closed the clip, then reopened it, zooming in frame by frame. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice calm, low, every word nailing the tile floor, "this is a frame job." Chaos erupted among the officers. "Wait, no way that's real. Jesus, that's his hand. That's definitely him. No question." Dalton backed away from the screen like it was about to bite him. "It's fake," he shouted, voice raw with desperation. "Those bikers edited it." Hawk took half a step forward, said nothing, just stood there, tall, eyes cold as the night Malcolm had saved him. Chains narrowed his eyes. "Feel free to accuse my client of tampering, but this video has timestamp, GPS lock, and untouched device metadata. In other words, it's admissible in court." That stopped Dalton's breathing for a second. Any cop or lawyer knows. GPS lock is the final nail. Sergeant Stone cleared his throat. "Run the metadata." Monroe didn't wait for a second order. She stepped up, plugged the USB in, and pulled up the tech readout. Lines of data filled the screen. 30 FPS, 4K, GPS, Arlington, Texas. Timestamp matched the body cam blackout log exactly. Monroe turned to the room, voice quiet but clear. "Timeline lines up perfectly." Dalton's body cam went dark at 7:38 p.m. This video starts at 7:38 p.m. The blackout was intentional. "Bullshit," Dalton screamed, voice cracking like glass. "My camera malfunctioned." 4 identical malfunctions in 8 weeks? Monroe shot back like a blade. "Really, detective?" Ruiz whispered. "Oh my God." Turner swallowed hard, face going pale behind the bravado. Chains stepped beside Monroe, both staring at the screen. "Detective Dalton," he said, "body cam blackout patterns are the first thing civil rights investigators look for, and your record is a textbook example of intentional misconduct." Dalton leaned back against the wall for balance, but nothing stopped the next hit. Chains opened a second video file. Hawk's alternate angle showing every threat to Malcolm's family. Derrick blocked, Tanya shoved, Ava screaming. "And this," Chains said, "is evidence of excessive force, child endangerment, coercion, and Fourth Amendment violations." A veteran officer behind Stone muttered, "Jesus, Ray, what did you do?" Dalton raised a hand like he was fighting for air. "It's all fake. He's a biker. He's a biker. He's a living witness." Chains finished, pointing at Hawk. "And he recorded everything from a public street. Your words, your actions, your lies. Nothing edited." Hawk finally spoke, voice low and hard as steel. "I watched you, I filmed you, and I'm not going anywhere." Dalton opened his mouth to argue, But right then a massive roar rolled in from outside. Not one, but dozens of Harleys revving like thunder. Chains said, "That must be the rest of the witnesses." The rookie squeaked, "There's more," and right on cue, the glass doors flashed with strobing news lights as 3 Dallas TV vans and a Fort Worth News 8 truck screeched into the lot. Reporters jumping out, mics up, cameramen setting tripods, drones buzzing overhead. This is Channel 5 live from Arlington North Division. Dozens of Hell's Angels have gathered. Allegations of planted evidence. Dalton went ghost white, stumbling back like an invisible hand just slapped him. "No, they can't be here." Chains gave the faintest smirk. "Freedom of the press, detective. You know that thing in the Constitution you keep violating," an officer whispered. "This is getting out of control." Monroe looked at Dalton. Her eyes no longer held doubt, only certainty. "You framed him," she said. Quiet, but loud enough for everyone to hear. Dalton spun toward her, eyes wild like a cornered animal. "You little..." "Don't," Chains warned, voice ice cold. Threatening a fellow officer in front of a lawyer and 24 witnesses is not a smart strategy. Sergeant Stone slammed his hand on the desk. "Enough." The room went dead silent. He looked at Dalton with pure disappointment, then at the frozen image of Dalton's hand planting the bag. "Detective Dalton, step away from this case, now." Dalton shook his head frantically. "You can't take my case. This is my arrest." "Not anymore," Stone said. Final as a gavel. "You're suspended pending investigation." Dalton took another step back until the wall stopped him, shirt collar shaking with his heartbeat. Turner looked at Dalton, at the video, at Monroe, his usual aggression gone, replaced by real fear. Ruiz rubbed his face, breathing heavy. No one wanted to be near this anymore. Chains stepped forward, calm, but every word carried the weight of the room. "My client was assaulted, his family terrorized, evidence planted, his name dragged through the mud. This ends now." A reporter banged on the glass. "Sir, is it true a civilian recorded the entire arrest? Is it true evidence was planted?" Stone yanked the blind shut, but it was too late. Drones were already filming the perfect circle of bikers outside, news towers lighting the night. The whole world was watching. Dalton stood almost catatonic, whispering, "This can't be happening." Chains leaned in slightly, eyes locked on Dalton. "It's happening because you made it happen," Monroe added, voice tight, hands trembling just a little. "And because you picked victims you thought had no voice." Hawk stepped up beside Chains, voice low like the engines still growling outside. "He's got a voice now, starting tonight." Chains turned to Stone. "Sergeant, based on this evidence, I demand the immediate release of my client, Malcolm Greene, and preservation of all logs, reports, and records related to this case." Stone nodded, tired but resolute. "Granted. Internal Affairs is already notified." Dalton spat one last desperate line, clinging to power that was already gone. "You think you can walk in here with your biker gang and make us dance?" Chains gave a thin smile, but Hawk looked Dalton dead in the eye, cold and sharp as a blade. "We're not making anybody do anything," Hawk said. "We just turned the lights on." And outside, under the circle of bikers and flashing news lights, a Fox 4 drone captured the whole scene live to thousands watching online. The truth had detonated. Dalton had nowhere left to run. No more lies. No more hiding. The case he staged, the script he wrote, had just collapsed in the very room he once thought was his kingdom. And the Hell's Angels, the group he never even considered, just did what all the previous victims couldn't. They brought the truth into the light. The front doors of Arlington North Division hadn't even closed behind the reporters shouting when a convoy of glossy black SUVs slid into the lot with precision that made every cop inside freeze. No sirens, no lights, but their presence hit the chaotic station like a cold wind. DOJ Civil Rights Division, gold badges flashing under the streetlights. Another vehicle stopped right behind. Doors opening to reveal black windbreakers with FBI in bold letters under the halogens. The entire night shift room held its breath unevenly. Sergeant Stone straightened on instinct. Dalton went sheet white, blood drained from his face. A dark-skinned woman in a sharp black suit walked in, hair pulled tight, eyes like blades. "Special Agent Celeste Ward, FBI. We're here in response to multiple civilian complaints and an attorney-submitted filing regarding civil rights violations by officers of this precinct." A man followed, DOJ badge gleaming. "Deputy Director Alan Brooks, DOJ Civil Rights. We need full access to evidence. logs and personnel, right now. Dalton reacted on pure reflex. You can't just barge in here. This is an active investigation. Ward raised a hand, voice calm and terrifying. Detective Dalton. She lifted an iPad already playing a few seconds of Hawk's video, Dalton's own hand planting the cocaine bag. Underneath, submitted to DOJ by attorney Marcus Wellington. GPS and timestamp verified. Ward continued. You planted evidence. You assaulted a civilian. You falsified reports. You violated the Fourth Amendment. You endangered minors. Need me to keep going? Dalton stammered. That video was taken out of. Brooks cut in. We have 4 similar cases tied to your badge number and matching body cam blackout logs. You're done talking. 2 FBI agents moved in. One read loudly, Raymond Dalton. You are under arrest on multiple federal charges under Title 18, including deprivation of rights under color of law, evidence tampering and civil rights violations. Dalton backed up, hands raised in desperation. No, this is wrong. I was just doing my job. Hawk and the 3 bikers stood like statues. No smiles, no taunts, just watching justice arrive. Dalton screamed toward them. They did this. They're criminals. The bikers didn't answer. They didn't need to. Ward signaled. The sharp click of handcuffs locking on Dalton's wrists, the same sound he'd used to humiliate others, now turned on him. The agent read Miranda. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Dalton thrashed. Turner, Ruiz, don't just stand there. Help me. Ward spun instantly. Officers Blake Turner and Cody Ruiz. Step forward. Turner was visibly shaking. Ruiz hung his head. Brooks said, for unlawful detention, excessive force and failure to intervene, you're both under arrest. Turner yelled. No, I didn't do anything. I was just following orders, Ward replied. Following orders is not a legal defense. Cuffs snapped on Turner. Ruiz dropped his arms, voice breaking. I knew something was wrong. I should have stopped it. Brooks, ice cold. Yes, you should have. No one in the room dared breathe loud as the Harleys outside idled like war drums for the collapse of a rotten system. Chains stepped close to Dalton and said quietly, cutting. I told you, detective, this was a frame job. Ward nodded toward the door. Take them out. The 3 cuffed officers were marched outside. Dozens of bikers parted silently. No touching, no threats, just watching the abusers of power led away under red and blue lights. Reporters shoved mics at Hawk. Sir, did the Hells Angels expose this? Hawk simply said. Just doing what's right. Dalton twisted his head and screamed. You did this to me. Rocco Delgado stepped forward. No, detective, you did this to yourself. Another biker added. Patch or no patch, right is right. Ward told Stone. We need a secure interview room, and release Mr. Greene immediately. Stone nodded. Already done. Hawk exhaled, shoulders loosening for the first time all night. The Harleys outside revved once, not in challenge, but in salute to justice served. As the 3 officers were led away, the air inside the station eased, like a toxic storm had finally been sucked out of the room. Chains turned to Stone. I'm getting my client now. Stone nodded. No argument. No excuses. He knew the only right thing left was to let Malcolm Greene walk out with his head high. Hawk walked beside Chains toward holding, his heavy steps lighter now. The holding room door opened. Malcolm sat on the metal bench, hands resting on his knees, face controlled but unbroken. He stood the moment he saw them. Chains gave a small smile. Malcolm, you're free. Malcolm closed his eyes for a second, like the words weighed his heart down and then lifted it all at once. Hawk stepped in. Said nothing, just placed a hand on Malcolm's shoulder, eyes saying every thank you in the world. They walked the hallway. When Malcolm appeared in the main lobby, every eye turned, but this time there was no suspicion, no prejudice. Monroe approached, voice sincere. I'm so sorry for what happened to you and your family. You didn't deserve any of it. Malcolm nodded gently. Thank you for doing what's right. Outside the glass doors, Harley headlights lit up the street like a runway. When Malcolm stepped out of the station, the Arlington night air felt wide open. The bikers stood in 2 perfect lines, leather gleaming with white angel patches, engines idling in unison. Then every single one shut off at the same moment, a silent ceremony of respect. Hawk walked down the steps and stood beside Malcolm like a bodyguard. The family minivan screeched up. Tanya flung the door open and ran before it fully stopped. Malcolm, she crashed into him. arms so tight Malcolm had to wrap his around her to keep them both standing. Derrick followed, punching his dad lightly in the chest. "Dad, I knew you didn't do anything." Ava ran last, eyes red but shining. "Daddy," the bad policeman lied. Malcolm knelt, lifting his daughter with arms, still bruised from cuffs. "It's okay, baby. Daddy's here." Hawk stood behind them, hands in his pockets, watching the reunion. Ava looked up at Hawk. "Are you a real angel?" The whole line of bikers chuckled softly. Hawk scratched his neck, rare awkwardness showing. Not the church kind, kid." Malcolm set Ava down and looked at Hawk. "He's more than an angel. He's a friend." The bikes fired up again, engines harmonizing like an invitation. Rocco Delgado stepped forward from the front row, cut open, President patch bright under the streetlights, holding a small white shield patch trimmed in red with black lettering. Protected by the angels. Rocco didn't smile, didn't make a speech. He just held it out and said, "Malcolm Greene, this one's for you." Malcolm touched the patch like it was sacred. "I'm not a member," Rocco answered. "You don't have to be. This is an oath, a promise. Anybody touches you again, they answer to us." Hawk nodded hard. "Damn right." Derrick stared at the patch in awe. Ava grinned. Tanya wiped tears and whispered, "Thank you, all of you." Chain stepped up, briefcase still in hand. "No need to thank us. Your husband saved one of ours once. Tonight that man and his brothers paid it back." Rocco raised a hand. Every Harley roared as one. Steel choir. One biker took point. Others fell in behind. Hawk fired up beside Malcolm and Tanya. "Let's get you home safe." Malcolm took Tanya's hand. Derrick put a hand on his dad's shoulder. Ava hugged her stuffed bear. They climbed into the minivan. The Harley formation moved, surrounding the Greene family vehicle like a royal escort, streetlights streaking across the patches like living fire. Arlington had never seen anything like it. A family escorted by the misunderstood riding tonight as heroes. When the minivan stopped in front of the house where it all began, Malcolm stepped out and looked at the line of bikes stretching down the block. For a few seconds he couldn't speak, just swallowed hard. Hawk killed his engine and clapped Malcolm on the shoulder. "You're home, brother, safe and sound." For the first time that horrific day, Malcolm smiled, really smiled, not because it was over, but because he knew he'd never stand alone again. Tonight he had an army of brothers at his back, and they had proven angels don't always have wings. Sometimes they ride Harleys and wear leather. A few days later, when the media storm had quieted, and Arlington settled back into routine, Malcolm raised the roll-up door of his garage, a small roadside shop he'd always been proud to call Greene's Auto and Repair. The metal door groaned upward, revealing the warm space smelling of motor oil, tools lined up neat, an old radio playing soft soul. On the wall above the front counter, Malcolm hung a brand new wooden sign. Rocco had delivered the night before, red letters burned bold into charred wood. "If you're in danger, knock. If they mess with you, they mess with us." Tanya stood behind him, arms crossed, smiling softly. "I think it's beautiful. Like a promise written down." Malcolm ran a hand over the still fresh paint. More than a promise, a reminder. Ava ran around coloring tiny stars on a Harley poster. Derrick helped his dad inventory tools. Tanya wiped the counter, like she was putting the world back in order. Then the familiar low rumble rolled into the lot. Deep, steady, like an old friend knocking. Malcolm didn't even have to look. Hawk walked in first, killing the engine and pulling off his half-helmet with that half-smirk. A minute later, Rocco rolled in on a deep red road glide and parked beside Hawk. "Morning, brothers," Hawk said, stepping inside. Malcolm held out a hand, but Hawk ignored it and pulled him into a short, real hug. "Good to see you back where you belong." Malcolm laughed softly. "I owe you more than one life saved." Rocco walked in, tapped the new sign. "Nice sign. Word around the neighborhood is this is the safest garage in Arlington now. Belongs to the man with a whole biker club on speed dial." Tanya laughed. Derrick stared at the two bikers like they were superheroes. Ova ran straight to Hawk and hugged his leg like a trusted pole. "Uncle Hawk, Daddy said you're a hero." Hawk's face went red, scratching his neck. "Oh, hero's a bit much." Ava tilted her head, dead serious. "Are you an angel?" Hawk blinked, looked to Malcolm for rescue. Malcolm laughed, knelt beside his daughter and rubbed her head. "Baby, not all angels have wings." Rocco folded his arms, lips twitching. Malcolm continued, voice warm. "Some angels ride Harleys." Ava's eyes lit up. "I knew it. She ran off to tell Tanya. Rocco slung an arm around Malcolm's shoulders and said low, "If you ever need us again, anytime you call." Malcolm nodded. "And if you ever need a bolt tightened or an engine rebuilt, I got you." "Deal," Rocco said. They stood there a moment. Malcolm, Hawk, Rocco, three men from three different worlds who had stood together on the right side of justice. Outside, a couple of bikers rode past and threw up two-finger salutes to Malcolm like he was honorary. He returned them, lighter than he'd felt in days. Derrick opened the big door wider, letting sunlight flood in. Ava stood in the driveway holding up her Harley, drawing. "Uncle Hawk, think the one I drew can ride?" Hawk threw his head back and laughed. "If you want, kid, I'll make it ride." Laughter filled the garage, mixing with the smell of oil and fresh morning sun. Then another sound rolled in. Low, strong, deep. The Harleys that had just left the corner, like a goodbye, a shield. A reminder that justice doesn't only come from badges or the government. It also comes from decency and from men in leather who ride Harleys and live the word brotherhood. Malcolm stood at the garage door, arms crossed, Tanya leaning on his shoulder, Ava hugging his leg, Derrick beside him learning how to stand tall like his dad. Malcolm smiled, let out a soft breath, and said, "Yeah, there really are angels who ride Harleys." And the last engines roared down the street, closing the curtain on one story, but opening a new cycle of good, where good people are protected, and steel angels are always ready to ride when someone needs saving. If you love emotional human stories like this, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next ones. Don't forget to turn on notifications to be the first to see our newest stories.